Well, welcome everyone, and I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kma'ki people, who have been here for over 11,000 years, and just really thrilled to be here virtually with everyone and to have us together to celebrate and to share knowledge, and to also recognize African Nova Scotian people who have been here for more than 400 years and to recognize their contributions and legacy also. So welcome to everyone. We have two presenters today. Our Wednesdays at noon are ongoing. So we have Zane will be going first, and then Claire. I believe you might have a PowerPoint presentation to share. And Zane, feel free to start uploading that.
Oh, hi, Megan. What I can do is I can share my screen if that's okay, and then I can, and then you guys will be able to see the slides if that's okay.
Absolutely. Yes. No, that would be great. And, we're giving you about 30 minutes, and then we'll let you know how the time is going, and then we'll let Claire have the other half because we do stop at 12. So welcome, Zane, and thank you so much for being a presenter today.
Thank you.
Great.
Okay, so I just want to make sure that everybody can hear me clearly.
Yes, yeah, perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's start. Okay, can you see the slides?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zane Ehsan. I am a semester 7 nursing student here at Dalhousie University. It's my last year. And today I'm going to talk about health disparities facing LGBTQ plus refugees and asylum seekers. This topic is very close to my heart because once upon a time, not long ago, I was an asylum seeker and I still identify as a refugee. Okay, so today I'm going to briefly talk about the what I found on the just it's a brief literature review. Basically, most of what I found is psychology journal. And then I'm going to break down the events into pre-migration events, migration events, and post-migration events in terms of what really influenced the mental health of LGBTQ plus refugees and asylum seekers. There's a little case study I'm going to talk about here. It's about Sarah Heggie. So some themes I was able to extract from reviewing what we already know about this population. Number one, mental health issues in this population are caused by factors related to traumatic events in the home country, the migration process, and events and post-migration events in the host country, in this case, Canada. Number two, we understand that the feeling of loneliness is higher among LGBTQ plus asylum seekers compared to non-LGBTQ plus asylum seekers and LGBTQ plus Canadians. Again, this is the concept of intersectionality. We can see how being a refugee and LGBT at the same time can be very can cause a lot of harm in terms of what society expects. We also understand that the migration process can significantly impact the mental health of LGBTQ plus asylum seekers. Number four, refugees fleeing wars in large groups are assumed to be heterosexual, hindering the needs of LGBTQ plus refugees embedded in this population. So what is going on here exactly? We have a marginalized population with different intersecting identities, and for each identity, there is a battle these individuals need to fight so they can exist. So these are the stressors associated with these identities, the stressors here, and they're broken down into 3 categories. The first one is general stress, and this is the stress like asylum seeking. The asylum seeking process itself is very stressful. Even if it goes smoothly, it's still a stressful um, procedure. The other one is living conditions. Living conditions can be very stressful for asylum seekers. For example, here in Halifax, they would live in small spaces. Like you would have 4, 5, or 6 asylum seekers in one space, and again with the conditions and what is going on with the world's COVID and other infections, these people can get sick really quickly. In terms of distal stress, this is the type of stress that that is caused by other people. What are other people doing that is causing this stress? Like, for example, here we have discriminations, harassment, physical violence, sexual violence, and assault. This is basically, again, like I said, stress caused by other people towards LGBTQ plus refugees and asylum seekers. Proximal stress is the result of fear and stigma. And in this case, fear can cause concealment of identity. People are scared to come out, and they actually live in societies where people are actually talking negatively about LGBTQ plus individuals all the time. And the other one is stigma causes internalized homophobia, and we've seen this in many cases. So how can people cope basically with all these stressors? Well, if you're successful, you're going to have supportive family. If you're lucky, sorry, you would have a supportive family and friends. Family in terms of like LGBTQ plus asylum seekers and refugees, families are not always a great help, but you can make your own friends, and that can help. Access to digital technology. This is what I actually used to do back home. We had a community, like people from different parts of the world. We would get together and talk about things that we've experienced, and it used to be very helpful, actually. Access to services, and that includes employment and financial support, housing, physical healthcare, and mental health care. That can be very helpful to kind of like mitigate all these stressors. But unfortunately, Canada normally fails here. Employment, basically accessing services is really hard. And of course, all of this affects our mental health, physical and sexual health, and physical security. So I'm going to talk about Sarah Hegazi. It's one case study that really applies to so many refugees and asylum seekers. So this is Sarah Hegazi's story. So 3 years before her death on June 14, 2020, Sarah attended an LGBTQ plus friendly concert in Cairo featuring the Lebanese band Mashrou' Layla, or Layla's Project. Members of this band are gay men who have challenged the heteronormative social structure in Lebanon. 1 week after the concert, the Egyptian authority detained Sarah and a few other people for attending an event featuring a musical band group that aimed to interfere with the Egyptian constitution. Sarah was jailed for 3 months, where officers brutally tortured her. She expressed the officers' use of torture methods such as electrical shocks and solitary confinement. She also verbalized that officers encouraged other prisoners to sexually assault her and abuse her. So you can tell, like, these experiences, like it was a 3 months in prison that probably caused a lot of trauma to Sarah Hegazi. These are some of the quotes that, some of Sarah Hegazi's quotes here. So after 1 year in Canada as a refugee, she said, even after my release, fear of everyone, family, friends, and the street continued to haunt me. A year after my Mashrou' Layla concert, a year after Egypt's biggest security attack against gay people, a year after I announced my difference, yes, I am gay, I have not forgotten my enemies. I have not forgotten the injustice that left black spots carved in my soul and bleeding spots that doctors had never been able to treat. So just by reading these quotes, we can see how like the feeling of isolation that she said this in Toronto, by the way. So she was already in Canada, and she was already battling a lot of her traumatic experiences in the past. Myself, like when I first came here, that was about 8 years ago, I felt very isolated the first year or year and a half, actually. And again, like no family, no friends, you don't know anybody. And it's like the legal status too, that's important too. So these are Sarah Higazi's final words. To my siblings, I have tried to find salvation and I have failed. Forgive me. To my friends, the journey was cruel and I am too weak to resist. Forgive me. To the world, you were horrifically cruel, but I forgive. So we can tell that she was battling a lot. Like she had a lot of trauma that she was dealing with that nobody basically was aware of, or maybe we didn't know how to tackle it. Like there isn't much resources out there to help LGBTQ plus refugees and asylum seekers. The legal system and the tremendous amount of stress it brings to asylum seekers. So refugee claimants are being asked to provide evidence of physical abuse from their home country. This may include photos of bruises, broken nose, and bleeding. So although some refugee claimants provide strong evidence about their sexual orientation, the legal system still demands them to prove that they were in real danger when they were in their home countries. For example, a refugee claimant may provide the judge with a picture of themselves being in an intimate situation with someone else, or they may provide the judge with long text message conversations with their partners or ex-partners. This may convince the judge that this person is gay, which is, by the way, is enough to actually grant someone refugee status. But the legal system still expects refugee claimants to provide police reports, medical files, or other forms of testimonies, all of which can be extremely difficult or impossible to obtain. And it's ironically, they're asking for police reports because in countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt, if you go to the police and say, okay, my father broke my nose because I am gay, they would be like, okay, good for him. And you'll go to jail because you're gay. So that doesn't work. And same thing goes to medical files. Probably people are not going to go and seek medical attention. Or even if they actually do seek medical attention, they would say it's a different reason. Refugee claimants' privacies are being hijacked by the legal system. Judges may often ask refugee claimants to provide photos or videos of them being in an intimate situation with someone else. This may trigger stigmas these individuals have been living with for a long time, going from hiding their sexualities in their home countries to being questioned if they have photos or videos that prove their sexuality can be very humiliating and may have long-term mental health consequences. I have personally been through the asylum seeking process. During the hearing, the judge asked me questions that were rather humiliating and degrading. The judge asked me if I could provide him with video recording or pictures of me being in an intimate situation with other men. That happened. When I told him that I did not have any proof of this type, he asked me if I am on any of the dating sites. I told him that I have a dating site account, but that I wasn't willing to share this with him. So unfortunately, I gave up at the end as I ran out of options. I gave him my login information and he gained full access to all of my conversations with other users. And so basically after this incident, the judge wanted to talk to my lawyer privately. He did talk to her privately, and my lawyer said, actually, he was convinced that you were gay before he even asked for those for your login information to see your conversations with other people. So next is post-migration events. The first one we're going to talk about is mental health deterioration. Refugees are less likely to report mental health symptoms and seek treatment for their mental health conditions compared to Canadians. This is due to stigma associated with mental health illness and problems with trusting the healthcare system. Immigrants' unpleasant experiences with the healthcare system. An example here is, it's a little story actually. I used to volunteer for the Halifax Refugee Clinic, and every once in a while I used to take asylum seekers to the hospital to get a physical examination done for immigration purposes. One day I went to the hospital with an asylum seeker, and he had to get his x-ray done. The x-ray technician told him that he wore a cap, and the x-ray technician told him that if it was her mother, she would have slapped him, and she asked him to take off the cap, and he did. And really, that experience was very traumatizing to this particular person. So 2 weeks after, he had to get another procedure done in the hospital. So I came to the refugee clinic to pick him up from there. And he said, "Are we going to the same hospital?" I said, "Yes." And he was like, "Can we go to a different place?" And this is just an example of how people actually may avoid the healthcare system because of these experiences. Socioeconomic impact on the mental health of refugees. Again, here, little money plus high cost of living equals poor mental health. And this study was conducted in Toronto, and we know it's the case actually in Halifax because life here is very expensive. Racism. So people of color, including LGBTQ plus refugees, face more racism compared to white European refugees, such as Ukrainian refugees. So the war in Ukraine really, and the refugee crisis, really brought to surface a lot of the issues that we've been having here for so many years. As opposed to African and Middle Eastern refugees, Ukrainian refugees were actually welcomed, and basically they don't face the same struggles as we do. So the concepts of inferiority relates to refugees of color. Refugees of color are more likely to experience racial trauma. Racial trauma are events that may involve, but not limited to, physical or emotional harm, prejudice, and humiliation. So physical health conditions associated with racial trauma, diabetes, hypertension, and heart disease, and mental health conditions associated with racial trauma include post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and attempts. Next is job insecurity. So qualified refugees are denied employment due to their immigration status. And that is actually evident among asylum seekers more than refugees. And then there's also lack of networking because they're starting really from ground zero here in Canada, and they don't know anybody. So it's so important to kind of like connect them to different communities so they can actually find I guess that does increase the likelihood of employment. So language is another problem, like speaking little English. And that's why we need programs like programs that teach English to immigrants, not run by volunteers, but by actual people who are hired to do this job. Accent is another problem. People could speak great English and they understand what other people say, but having an accent is really a deal breaker to so many employers. The other problems is names on resumes, actually having different names, not different names, like cultural names, like names that are not English names, basically. That really, it does decrease people's chances of getting employment. And that happened to me actually personally when I first moved here. And my lawyer looked at looked at my resume, and she was like, you need to change your name. I'm sorry, but you need to change your name so you can find employment. And then I found employment within two weeks. So that worked. Next is housing. So in terms of housing, so we do have structural barriers to language, income, and employment. They all contribute to lack of housing. So again, like everything that we've discussed here, they all come together to impact people's chances of finding good housing. So refugee claimants face additional barriers to securing housing, so mainly because of their status as temporary residents, but refugees are also being discriminated against because of their ethnic background or immigration status. And of course, add to this the issue of housing that we already have right now. Okay, thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Zane. Absolutely excellent presentation. I love the way you pulled together literature, your personal experiences, and just made it so understandable, I think, for a lot of us, and the intersectionality and the complexities. Just an amazing job. Thank you so much. So we've got 9 minutes and love to have comments from our audience, questions, so we can keep the conversation going. Okay. And I mean, if people want to just jump in and say something, or you can put up your hands, feel free. Sorry, Lisa, I see your hand. Go ahead.
Well, I hate to be the first one because, you know, I've had the wonderful opportunity to hear some of this with Zane. Zane, it's so powerful. And, you know, Karen wrote this as well. The courage of you, you know, is really mind-blowing. And you do it with such incredible generosity. And there still is such a joy within you that I continue to marvel at. But you know, one of the things I think about is, you know, I see this also as we've talked about, sort of that beginning wonderful template for your research. But I also think that all of us, you know, within the School of Nursing and beyond need to be hearing this, you know, especially within the educational setting, because so many of the clinical instructors, the professors, the educators, students, everybody, this is something that needs to be shared. You know, putting the onus on you is problematic, of course, but any thoughts on, you know, how this kind of work, stories and literature combined could be shared, because so many folks don't realize the depth of this. I mean, and even Sarah's, you know, we talked about Sarah's story is, I mean, I just wept when I read those quotes, are just horrifying. And that's one of many, but, you know, it's so compelling. So any thoughts on, you know, how does this get shared? Because most people don't appreciate how horrific these experiences are.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of us are not outspoken, like LGBTQ plus refugees and asylum seekers, and a lot of people, like, they don't get like really opportunities to really voice their opinions, right? I was lucky. I met great people since I came here, and that's why I'm here. And you know, and I felt like I really need to you know, voice my opinion, and not my opinion, the facts that we actually that I know about this population that other people don't know, right? And really, it's like, for example, talking about the legal system, for example, a lot of people are scared to come forward and talk about this, right? And the legal system, like these judges really abuse their power, right?
Yeah.
Like,
It's horrific. I mean,
oh, absolutely.
I can't even believe that something like that is permitted to happen. Yeah. So anyway, something for me and many of us to think about, how that, you know, that's also something that could be integrated into curricula, right? Because I think that's critical knowledge to be integrated into curricula as well. So something for us, I think, to think about. But thank you so much. It was an incredible presentation and leaves much for me as well to think about. So thank you for your brilliance and your courage. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Great. Sorry, I was frozen. Jennifer.
Hi, Zane. Great job. I saw your name today and I said I have to be there. I think Canada is, I think, the most progressive country in the world with regards to the rights of queer people. And I'm always saying that, you know, we should be leaders in this. And I think there's a complacency that comes along with how progressive we are. So I just wanted to say I'm so thankful that we have you to really push that and highlight how much of a responsibility Canada and Canadians have in leading this work. So you are so welcome here and supported, and let us help raise your voice. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you.
I don't know where Megan went. So I noticed someone else's hand and I can't see who it was. So if you want to ask your question, go ahead. Is it Murphy? I need to get access to, okay. Hey Megan, you're back.
So sorry, I keep getting kicked out.
Oh, sorry. Somebody else is trying to ask a question, but they're trying to get their camera to work first. Or you can just ask the question. It doesn't matter about the camera.
Yeah, sorry, I don't see anyone's hand up, but are there any more questions? Just shout it out. There seems to be some difficulties technically.
Yes. Murphy, did you want to ask a question? It doesn't matter about the camera. Oh, I keep having to admit. Oh, D has a question, I believe.
Go ahead, Dee.
Yeah, I don't know. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to kind of applaud Zane for the presentation. A lot of what you said spoke directly to myself. I didn't come here as a refugee. I also didn't come as this thing. I came as a permanent resident, but I'm originally from a hybrid of Nigeria and Ghana, and the experience has been the same. Even right now, like especially the parts you spoke about, you know, changing names to sound less ethnic, and it's interesting because right now I'm using a less ethnic name, and that's not actually the that's not the actual that's not my name fully spelled out. And I'm looking at the experience that you had laid out and how that speaks to, I think, everyone who comes into the country, especially depending on your. In my case, I'm really more like a mocha drink, really dark colored. So I think that as you go on the darker scale, like it gets the story gets more and more complicated. So just to applaud Zane for throwing some light into this, and also it's more like I feel like there's a duty upon us as we assimilate into society, ourselves as immigrants. Like right now, I've settled into the country. I've had different roles, and in every role I've had, I've tried to make sure that we have to make sure that we create some form of social impact that kind of clears the way, so that folks that come after us don't have to go through the same experiences that we had to endure. So I feel like sometimes that's, but thank you. I feel very seen by hearing your story.
Well, thank you for your feedback. And I actually changed my name legally, first, middle, and last, back in 2018 without getting married. So I just went to Nova Scotia Vital Statistics and I was like, change my name right now. So my name was very, very, very Saudi. and so, yeah, that worked.
Just looking at the time, and so thank you again, Zane, for your amazing presentation. We absolutely need to take all of the messages that you have given us today and help move them forward. And we'll look forward to hearing more from you. And so we'll look for those opportunities. So thanks for the questions, everyone. And we will move on to our next presenter, Claire. And if you have, I don't know if you have PowerPoint to share or what you need.
I do, so I'll just share my screen. Just give me one sec.
Great.
Seeing if there's a way that I can share that I can see my notes. I don't think there is.
All right. Otherwise, with you.
What's that?
Yeah, we can see the whole screen, but
yeah, I was just trying to see if I can do it in. Sorry, I'm going to stop for 1 sec and see if I can do it so I can see my notes. And if not, it's fine because I can.
That's okay. We'll just take a 1 minute break, everyone.
Yeah.
Yep. Don't feel pressured. Claire was kicked out and now we're getting her back.
Sorry, that's my fault. I went to hit the share button is right next to the leave button. So I hit the leave button. So now I will share my screen. I'm kidding.
Great.
Okay. And okay, I think this should be good. Is that everyone can see that okay?
Yep.
Okay.
That's great. Okay.
Perfect. So first, I just want to thank Zane, who I was supposed to go first today, and I contacted Julie and allowed us to switch, which was super helpful. And I'm sorry that I missed the first presentation. I'm in PEI right now, and I was at the PEI Provincial Correctional Center this morning, working on another study, and things in jails things come up and you kind of just have to go with the flow. So I was a little delayed. And so, yeah, it's a totally separate project, but I thought I would just mention it because this is kind of where most of my research interest lies, is with the experience and the health of incarcerated women and gender diverse people. But I've been volunteering as a doula, working with this population for about 5 years now. And so this research interest in the efficacy of doulas, Although this project has really nothing to do with working with criminalized populations, it did kind of evolve from there. And so this interest in abortion doulas came from supporting clients who might be choosing any number of outcomes for their pregnancy, and being interested in the role that doulas can play in abortion care in Canada. Okay, so just a brief land acknowledgement. Actually, I'm in PEI right now. I'm in Charlottetown, so I should have done a little research on where I'm coming from today, but this work was conducted in Mi'kma'ki. And just our partner, or my partners on this project, my supervisor, Martha. Anya is our research assistant who was very involved in this work and is also a doula. And then we have Melissa Fuller and Melina Caston-Gay, are both abortion doula experts, really, with a lot of experience. And I'll talk a little bit in the methodology about how they were involved in this research. And just a note, as we go through the PowerPoint, all the illustrations are done by Julia Hutt, who's a fantastic artist in Halifax. And this is something that our lab does with our research with criminalized people, to just sort of, you know, show criminalized people as, you know, strong and beautiful and represent them how they want to be seen. And then we've kind of taken the same approach with the abortion work to show it as these sort of neutral images to destigmatize. So just a little bit of like framing for this work, and I kind of mentioned how it fits into my other research program, but we try to ground everything in an understanding of reproductive rights. Reproductive justice is a concept developed by Black American feminists in 1994. People are probably familiar with it, but essentially reproductive justice or rights affirms that people have the right to have or not have children, to parent children in a safe and sustainable environment, the right to express your gender and sexuality, and freedom from gender-based violence. So some background on abortion in Canada. This will be super high level, but abortion is completely decriminalized in Canada. There were a lot of changes between 2015 and 2017 as prescriber ability changed, and mostly with the approval of mifepristone by Health Canada. So medication abortion was approved in 2015, widely available by 2017. It's completely publicly funded, and it did help with a lot of mitigating some of the barriers related to especially geographic disparities in access. Certainly didn't mitigate all the barriers, which will come up in the themes of this research, and some early regulatory restrictions associated with medication abortion, about particularly pharmacy and nurse practitioner ability to prescribe, were soon abandoned after 2017. So we really are in a time period of expanded access and a lot of interest in understanding how abortion care and provision has changed. So as I said, despite being decriminalized and publicly funded, we have a pretty protected access to abortion in Canada, and now expanded access with medication abortion. There are still barriers to abortion care, of course. So some of these barriers would be geographical and travel barriers for people in rural and remote communities. Gestational duration limits, although there are no actual laws stating certain gestational duration limits. It will depend on provider training and preference. So it's going to greatly vary beyond just province to province. It'll vary, provider to provider, clinic to clinic. Funding. So while it is publicly funded, of course, there are people who are undocumented, international students, youth who may not be able to access public health care in Canada. And then there's also private costs. So again, this is kind of exacerbated in rural areas, but it applies across the board, that there may be childcare costs, travel costs for yourself, gas, missed time at work. So kind of those costs that fall on the patient. So doulas are typically defined as a non-clinical support person who provides emotional, physical, and informational support throughout the perinatal period. So There's been a decent amount of research on the positive impact of doulas on birth and postpartum outcomes. Actually, a study came out today that I got like a little alert from my doula research alerts that showed, it was a big meta-analysis in the States that showed a 68% reduction in cesarean section compared to a control group without doulas. That's not cited here, but just interesting because I saw it this morning. So there is a lot of research showing the value of having this non-clinical support person. So some doulas are very birth focused. Other doulas, sometimes they refer to themselves as full spectrum doulas, support so the full spectrum of pregnancy outcomes, so including birth, miscarriage, adoption, abortion. And then there's also, we're seeing more common abortion doulas who specifically support people seeking an abortion. So we did do a scoping review last fall as we started this research on the role of abortion, or the role of doulas in abortion and contraception. We identified 33 studies, none in Canada, most of the studies in places with very restrictive laws. So you can see why the doula support role would be even more sort of critical or important navigating sort of legal and policy barriers. We found that doulas support both procedural and medication abortions, and they do a lot of really complex navigation. So again, in places with very restrictive access, certainly doing extremely complex systems navigation, but also in countries with protective laws, still a lot of navigating access and navigating healthcare system. So with all that in mind, doulas have the potential to mitigate barriers to access abortion and to advance access, but there is little known about their role, their scope, and their efficacy. So the objective of this qualitative study was to understand the experience of abortion doulas in Canada with respect to their role and their training and mentorship needs. So we're looking at role and scope, efficacy. That would have to be, a future study looking at people who have access to abortion doula support. But we wanted to kind of as a starting point understand what abortion doulas in Canada do. So we followed principles of community-based research where people from the community we were working with, in this case, not people seeking abortion, but abortion doulas were involved in the methodology from the get-go. So we have 2 abortion doula experts, one Anglophone, one Francophone, who've been involved in this project from the beginning. So they assisted with all aspects of the design of the study, the execution, and are now, well, we've completed analysis, but have assisted with analysis and knowledge translation. We created a doula directory. This is kind of a separate little mini study that was a part of the recruitment that we realized there was no national directory of doulas. So we created a doula directory searching online materials systematically. There's a lot of limitations to this approach. It's just what people have online. But we did create this directory. I think there's I want to say 700 doulas in the directory, and out of those, 100 identified as providing abortion support. And there's some more kind of stats on, are they rural, are they urban, what else do they provide in this separate paper that we've submitted. So we reached out to all the doulas who identified as providing abortion support. They had the option to complete their interview in English or French, and everyone received a $50 honorarium. Okay. So in the end, we had 15 people complete an interview. There was a real range of experience. So we interviewed people who said, I've been doing this for 10 years. Before I was calling myself a doula, I was providing, abortion support. And we also interviewed people who had taken an abortion doula training in the last year and were, eagerly starting to support clients. Geographically, we had pretty good kind of diversity across the country. We had participants who identified as Indigenous, queer and Francophone, and as living and practicing in a remote or rural community. So just like an overview of kind of what we found, our three key themes. So first we were interested in, or the interviews told us, what do abortion doulas do? So they do a lot of navigation, they provide emotional and physical support, and then they engage in sort of bigger picture advocacy that goes beyond their client relationship. Challenges, so what challenges do they face? So there's a lot of complexity in the clients that were kind of self-selecting to seek the support of a doula. So, you know, we're not saying that all people seeking an abortion have these very complex cases, but the people who may be seeking out extra support end up being very complex cases that people were sometimes didn't feel prepared or supported to support this client, especially if they're volunteers. Which relates to the next theme of sustainability. So a lot of these people are doing this on a volunteer basis. Some of them had a private business as a birth doula and were doing this sort of pro bono work. Others just like activists or people in the community who were providing this support. So a lot of issues with sustainability in terms of remuneration and the sort of capacity of the doula. And then the facilitators to this abortion doula support work, adequate training, and community and connections to community. So I'm going to go through each theme. And this is where I should have planned and had a way to have my notes separate, because I just have the quotes up here, but I'll talk a little bit about each theme. I think because I've been working on this research so much, I can probably just speak to it off the cuff. So the navigation was a huge part of what abortion doulas do. This first quote here, they said, "The lack of access to the services is an issue, but also the lack of financial resources for the people who do have to travel, have to take time off work, have to pay for gas or have childcare, what have you. All of those things are an issue specific to any area outside of the city." So there's the navigation to access the service itself. So what clinic do I go to? What number do I call? In certain places, this was more complicated than other places. Everyone we interviewed in Quebec said that the system is it's just like difficult. You can't Google, it's not easy to find. That's certainly not the case everywhere. So there's that navigation aspect. And then also this navigating this really like meeting the logistical needs of their client, the gas, the childcare, time off work, supporting youth who may be traveling alone and need a credit card or an adult to check them into a hotel. Yeah, so supporting all this navigation through multiple sort of systems and trying to advocate for their client. So in terms of support, so there's the physical support that clients sometimes wanted if they're having a procedural abortion. It's very varied how the accompaniment policies of clinics for security and other reasons. So what we saw more was this emotional support. So this client or this doula is saying, some of our clients, it really is just that they need to get from point A to point B and you're just accompanying them. But with some of our clients, I've worked with some clients for up to 6 months, where it's not that we're speaking every day, but maybe once a month they reach out because they want to talk and you're the only person in the world who knows that they had an abortion. So they're really filling this gap where a client may actually reach out to them after they've accessed the service. They don't need so much the navigation, but they need that continuous support that they can't access within the healthcare system. So some of the challenges, so as I mentioned, really the complexity was the major challenge that people identified. So this participant said, you might feel most comfortable dealing with somebody who is maybe in their 20s or 30s, but dealing with youth, dealing with situations that involve sexual assault, incest, things like that is, I think, just a discomfort for people. They don't know how to interact with folks like that. They don't know the situation. They don't know how much to ask or not ask. People who are sex workers, people who use substances, I think those are groups where people have a really difficult time navigating those situations. So as I said, we don't want to, say that everyone needs an abortion doula. It's certainly not the case. It can be extremely routine and you don't need that extra support. But we found from interviewing doulas, the people that are seeking support just do have higher needs that doulas didn't always feel totally prepared to meet. And so this quote speaks about the sustainability and the remuneration access. I can't expect that someone is able to pay me, and I don't want to ask for payment all the time as well, but I also need to pay my own bills. So it's kind of a difficult kind of balancing act. So participants talked about, I think one of them gave the example of, when you support a birth doula, you ask the parent pays, they have a baby in their arms, it's very happy, and not to say that the abortion can't be a positive experience, but they just felt like asking for remuneration was awkward. It was just a very different dynamic and different sort of client doula relationship. So this led to, a lot of people who were doing it on a very volunteer basis, having to reduce their client load, community groups who were trying to, scrape by and get a few grants here and there to be able to give doulas honorariums and pay for gas cards and things like that. So real challenge to sustain this work. So kind of on the flip side, so there's this complexity as a challenge. A facilitator is having really comprehensive training. So this participant said, if the client calls you and they're like, I'm having a D&C on Monday, you don't want to be asking the client what that is. If you know what that means, you have more of a sense of what they're going to be going through on that day. Even if they were to ask specific questions and you're kind of like, it would be really great to ask your provider, or they'd be the best authority on it because it can look a little different depending on what clinic you're at whatnot. It's still so important to have that information. So they really, this was identified time and time again, and it's kind of playing into the knowledge translation products that are coming out of this, that in recognizing that they're non-clinical and that you will have to refer back to the provider, but just to have more of an understanding of, okay, this is what's going to happen to you. You're going to go in, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. They felt that they were lacking that. Another aspect of training that was lacking was this regional specific information. So this participant said, so many trainings are not in the rural area that I live in. So that would be really, really ideal for people here. When I did my doula training, it was very much based, obviously, we were in the city. And so many times I would be like, oh, guys, we don't have those services and we don't have those technologies here yet. Or there are all these things that I was like, this isn't applicable to our region. So given that doulas might be more sought after in rural or remote areas, this was a gap in the training as well. This quote is in the facilitators section because this doula went on to explain how they created a guide of local resources. And finally, a big facilitator was community. So community with other doulas and community with other service providers, and then community with abortion providers. So it's a long quote, but I think it sums it up really well. So I'm going to read it. So this doula said, I guess I'm sort of living in this beautiful dream world of it being so much community building and people are so supported. If someone was operating in a community where they didn't have access to a strong, active collective or another network of doulas, I think that would really dampen their experience, just because of how much I've gained from my experience with this sort of awesome end of the spectrum. That's been the most valuable connection out of everything for me to have direct knowledge of medicines and exactly what the procedure looks like, what it's going to look like for the client before, during, and after. That has all come from our hospital and the connections that our collective, so it's a doula collective, has made for the group of doulas that are a part of it. The real life training from the actual people doing the procedures really arms me with more knowledge to be able to support my clients. So some of the limitations of the study that we recruited through this directory. So we're only recruiting people who are publicly listing themselves as an abortion doula. A lot of this stuff is like, it's word of mouth, it's people in the community. You're kind of making yourself vulnerable to stigmatization potentially, depending on where you're working. So that's a limitation in just who we were able to reach. And some of the important things that came out, the dominance of transportation support. I think every person we interviewed said, I drive people to appointments. I do a lot of driving. That was interesting. We weren't expecting that. It maybe raises some questions about insurance and liability and how that plays into sustainability. There's a lot of healthcare system knowledge required. This is very different from the role of a birth doula who, as a birth doula practicing, or as a doula practicing in Halifax, most people know where they're going to give birth. They're going to give birth at the IWK in most cases. So it's not, you're providing a lot of informational support, but it's not so much like, I need to figure out how to get this appointment and I don't understand where to go. I don't know which clinic to choose. So there's a lot more healthcare system knowledge required. The complexity in the client base, again, this was surprising to us, really interesting finding. The compensation, I would say this is not as surprising because it's an issue with, volunteer doula work and community work and even paid private doula work to be remunerated for your work and to be able to sustain yourself in that work. And finally, I think a main takeaway is that doulas really seem to be filling this gap in the healthcare system in terms of the both the navigation and the continuous support after. So the fact that all the doulas identified doing this work, which is consistent with what we found in our scoping review. Clearly there is a gap. This is something that people want, whether that should be formalized in the healthcare system or not is something to look into further, but it could be, problematic and not sustainable that it's primarily community networks and volunteers who are kind of filling this gap. So overall, patients continue to face barriers accessing abortion. Doulas may play a role in improving access, but future research is needed to investigate the perspectives of people who have used an abortion doula, as well as the attitudes, policies, and sort of procedures regarding doulas among abortion providers and clinics, and sort of identifying, like that last quote, has this amazing relationship with their clinic, identifying how doulas could be integrated into a way that's beneficial for everyone. And that's it. So I will stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much, Claire. We have 3 minutes, so I'm going to turn it over to the audience. And thank you so much. I mean, what an amazing topic you and your team are researching, and just looking at the sort of the invisible and the stigma and really bringing voices to light. So turn it out to the audience if there is a comment or a question. And where have you been able to present your findings so far, Claire?
So we're working on an abortion doula toolkit with our abortion doula experts, with Melissa and Melina. So that'll be kind of something for doulas to kind of give them more of that that comprehensive training that they identified wanting. I'm going to present at the National Abortion Federation annual meeting in the spring, and then we're working on doing some kind of provider level reaching out, and this is also kind of setting the stage or starting conversations about future research that we might want to do about how providers or clinics feel about having these non-clinical support people in that space.
Right, so a real program of your research. You have been and you will continue to follow through with this.
Yeah, yeah.
Very exciting, really important. I just see a chat from Kim. Can you read the chats?
Oh, yeah. Kim just said that they're interested in the future of this. So, yeah, I think the Wellness Within website, we would post some of the abortion doula, some of the knowledge translation outputs, as well as the CART access. I can just put that in. It's a bigger research team at UBC that we're kind of working under the umbrella of, so all our knowledge translation products would be there as well.
All right, so
yeah.
National work.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the Maritimes and it tends to be maritime focused, but we were able to recruit nationally since all the interviews were virtual, and we're kind of housed within CART. So that helps us get that national scope for this work.
Wonderful. Great. Okay, anything else from our audience? Wonderful. Okay, so yeah, we're just right on time. So thank you so much, Claire, for sharing all of this with us today. And just thank you to both our presenters, Zane and Claire. All of this will be up online so that we can share this with more students, faculty, and people from beyond the university too. Okay, well, wishing everyone a good rest of the day, and we'll see you back here. I can't remember the next date for Wednesdays at noon, but we will have more of this.
The next one's the 7th of February, so I'll send out the poster. And if anyone wants to join the centre or be added to a list, just email me, julie.barry@dal.ca, and I'll add you in. And I will stop recording.
Thank you. Great. Okay.